Hi everyone, welcome to Poisonous People. Today I'm going to start an entire series on gaslighting. In this particular first video, we are going to define old school versus modern gaslighting. We're going to talk about their different definitions, goals, and give a few examples. So, what is old school gaslighting? It is a term that I made up to describe my understanding of gaslighting between the years 1994 and 2021. I became interested in this subject when I myself was a victim of psychological abuse. I was very interested in educating myself on all types of psychological abuse terms. I became a therapist and for 28 years never really came across any issues in helping people understand what gaslighting is until this year. Now, if you go through this series with me and you discover that you do agree with the modern day understanding of gaslighting, that's okay. As a former cult member, I made up my mind a long time ago that I was going to have full control over my own decisions and no one was going to tell me what to think. And so that's one of the goals that I have for all of my clients and all of you. Now, I just want to be very clear. I am settled on this issue. I reject the modern day understanding of gaslighting, and I hope that anything I share here will help you reach that point where you are confirmed in your own mind, either way, how you understand the concept of gaslighting. First, we're going to look at the two different definitions of gaslighting. Now, I'm going to share with you that I recently took a course for mental health professionals on gaslighting because I was curious how this course was going to be presented. And it was presented in the modern day understanding of gaslighting. So I am actually going to be using the definitions that were discussed in that training. And the definitions that I'm going to be showing you here were pulled right from that PowerPoint presentation. The definition for old school gaslighting is just coming from me, my experience. It's the definition that I've always used, so I just want to let you know where these definitions are coming from. So let's look at what we have here. Now, just so you know, the terms psychological abuse and emotional abuse are generally interchangeable. I prefer the term psychological abuse because I do think that much of what we experience as victims or targets is mental in nature. They are targeting the way we think. So I just prefer the term psychological abuse. So in old school definition, you have a very short, succinct definition. It's just one person undermining another person's perception of reality. In the modern day version, they're breaking that down further. They're giving you examples of how reality might be defined. So they are explicitly spelling out for you thoughts, feelings, judgments, perceptions, and or memories. So that's how the two definitions differ. But the goal of modern day gaslighting is to create self-doubt, undermine self-confidence, and make the victim feel unsure of themselves. And then that goal goes on to say that chronic gaslighting can cause the victim to doubt their sanity and or reality. Now, when we look at the old school goal, well, there's nothing else there. I just had to repeat the definition that was on the previous slide because the goal is implied in the definition. So when we look at these two different goals, we can see that the modern day version of gaslighting considers gaslighting to have been achieved if I just cause you to doubt yourself or I undermine your confidence. In the old school version, that's not enough. There's a lot more work that goes into old school gaslighting. In old school gaslighting, I'm actually chipping away at your sanity. So it's not enough to just simply say, are you sure you want to wear that? Or I never said that. That's not enough in the old school understanding. A lot more has to go into it. So what's interesting here is that modern day gaslighting kind of just stops at the self-confidence level and the self-doubt level. But then they go on to say that chronic gaslighting can cause victims to doubt their sanity and or reality. In the old school version, that is the goal. The chronic gaslighting and doubting your sanity and reality, that is the goal. So in order to achieve that goal, you have to take steps to reach it. And I would argue that what modern day gaslighting considers to be the goals of gaslighting, I would consider those to be the objectives of old school gaslighting. One of the most common things that people misunderstand is the difference between goals and objectives. So I'll give you an example. Let's say somebody goes to therapy and they are diagnosed with major depressive disorder. What would be the goal of that person's therapy? Would the goal be to help them find coping strategies? Do you think people who are depressed go to a therapist and say, what I really want is to learn how to cope with my depression? Or what I would really like is some medication? Or what I would really like is to psychoanalyze myself and see where this depression came from? No, the goal of therapy is to reduce or eliminate the depression. If the person is coming to therapy because they have depression, then the goal is we need to fix this depression somehow. We need to treat that depression. How do we do that? How do we reduce that person's depression or eliminate it? Well, we take steps. So we might suggest that they see a psychiatrist or a doctor and get some medication. We might suggest some techniques, mindfulness, meditation, breathing, whatever. We might also give them some coping skills to help them deal with depression in the moment. But none of those things are the actual goal of therapy. Those are the steps we take to reach our goal. And so I would say that this is the major difference between old school gaslighting and modern day gaslighting, is that modern day gaslighting stops at the objectives and calls that the goal. So once I've made some cutting remark to you, or once I've said something nasty to make you kind of doubt your self-esteem, gaslighting has been achieved, mission accomplished. It's not that simple in old school gaslighting. There's a lot of work that goes into old school gaslighting. So let's take a deeper look at how to distinguish between the two. In modern day gaslighting, the following things would suffice as gaslighting. A remark that often causes someone to feel bad, lower their self-esteem, undermine their self-confidence or self-worth. A remark that denies someone's reality or truth. Another example would be a remark that causes one to doubt oneself. Old school gaslighting, I like to think of it as a machine of many moving parts. It is typically chronic. In other words, it is a process. Old school gaslighting also has a certain degree of theatricality. And what I mean by that is that there's a great deal of effort that goes into setting the stage and creating the illusion that what I'm telling you is real is really real. So in many ways, old school gaslighting is similar to a hoax or a prank, but it is, of course, not funny at all. And it requires trust and isolation to be successful. If somebody doesn't trust the gaslighter, if they don't really put much stock in what the gaslighter has to say, then gaslighting fails. It can't happen. And likewise, in order for gaslighting to be successful in the old school model, there needs to be isolation. If I'm chipping away at your reality, I need to eliminate any competition to the idea that the illusion is reality. So because I'm very biased toward the old school version of gaslighting, I believe that modern gaslighting creates confusion. And that confusion occurs when somebody isolates a single piece of the gaslighting process and assumes that this is gaslighting. In other words, they're separating the parts from the whole and then calling those parts whole. Next, I'm going to introduce two examples. These are real life examples of modern day versus old school gaslighting. So this first example I pulled from the training. This example comes from the therapist who was giving that training. And this example is something that really did happen to her. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to offer my example of old school gaslighting, what I think gaslighting is, with a very similar example, a real life example of something that actually happened to me. Okay, so here's the modern day example. A mother is upset over the boundaries her daughter has learned in therapy. The mother lashes out at the therapist in an email saying, "I don't appreciate you practicing your new therapy skills on me." Now, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. When I went through this training and this therapist was giving this example, I really struggled to understand how that's gaslighting. The reason it is considered gaslighting in the modern day understanding is because this comment caused the therapist to doubt her competence. It was a nasty, rude, snotty comment that made her doubt herself, made her wonder if maybe she had done something wrong to make this mother angry. So again, with all due respect to that particular therapist and everyone else out there that holds this view, I just disagree with that. I don't think that's enough to warrant the label of gaslighting. So let me give you a similar example that happened to me. This is what I consider gaslighting. A mother is upset over the boundaries her daughter has learned in therapy. The mother hacks into the daughter's email, impersonates the daughter, writes the therapist an email stating, "I am no longer in need of your services. Please cancel all future appointments." Now, this has always been my classic understanding of gaslighting. Look at the trouble that this person went through. It was more than just writing an email telling me that she was miffed that I taught her daughter boundaries. In the old school version of gaslighting, you have several moving parts. You have an invasion of privacy, the hacking into the email. Then you also have the therapist, myself, being given the impression that the client wants something that she doesn't want, which is to stop therapy. And the way that this impression was given to me was that the mother actually impersonated the client. Now, in my opinion, this is definitely an attempt to undermine reality. It's more than just writing an email saying, "Hey, I'm really upset that you're helping my daughter be strong." This woman hacked into the email, wrote the email, impersonated the daughter. In the modern day example, the therapist is very clear as far as who she's talking to. She is very clear that the daughter's not the one complaining, it's the mother. In the old school version, I don't know that I'm not talking to the person I think I'm talking to. In the old school version, there was a lot of effort put into making me believe that the client was done with therapy and she didn't want to meet with me anymore. And that just wasn't true. This, as you can also see, is much more nefarious. There's a lot more pathology that goes into old school gaslighting, which is why I believe there's so much confusion today over what gaslighting really is. But I'm going to get into that in a future video. In the meantime, let's look at another example. And this example is hot off the press. This is a real life example that a client gave to me just this past Friday. So I'm going to just make up what the modern day version would look like, and then I'm going to tell you the old school version. I did embellish a teeny bit in the old school version. I will tell you what I embellished after I give you the example, but I want this to be very, very clear so that you can tell the difference. Okay, so here's the modern day example. A husband tells a wife, "You left your curling iron on again. You're so irresponsible." So in the modern day understanding, that mission is complete. Gaslighting has been achieved. In the old school model, it's going to take a lot more than that. So here we go. A wife unplugs her curling iron and leaves the house. The husband plugs it back in, waits for it to heat up again, then deliberately holds the hot iron in his hand to burn himself. He tells the wife she forgot to turn the curling iron off and accuses her of being irresponsible, showing his burnt hand as proof. He then calls the police to have her Baker acted. Now, if we compare the elements of the two examples, the modern day version of gaslighting, all that was required was a comment that creates self-doubt by accusing the wife of being irresponsible. In the old school version, you need more parts to the machine. So first we have the theatricality, the setting the stage, and that would be accomplished by plugging the curling iron back in and then deliberately burning himself. And again, this is one of the reasons that old school gaslighting is so nefarious, because people will go to incredible lengths to create the illusion of reality. And so this person, I will say in real life, the part that I embellished is that the wife isn't 100% sure if she unplugged it or not, but she probably did. And maybe he's just saying that, but he said he burned his hand. And so I kind of made up the part just to give you a very clear illustration of what lengths people will go to. They will actually plug this thing back in and then hold the hot part and sear their own hand and try to accuse you of harming them. So definitely you can understand why when I think of gaslighting, I think of stuff that's like next level. This new modern understanding of gaslighting is very hard for me personally to take seriously as gaslighting when I think about what I've always known as gaslighting. Then, of course, you have the comment, the original comment that exists in the modern day version, the comment that creates self-doubt. But then finally, you have this very vindictive, evil attempt to destroy the victim by Baker acting her. And if you don't live in Florida, or possibly if you do live in Florida, you don't know what a Baker Act is. It's basically a Florida law that allows a person to be institutionalized or evaluated for any kind of psychological or psychiatric disorder against their will. So that's what the husband was going for. And just a funny little afterthought, the police were called, and the wife had said to me that she thought it was so funny because, of course, you know, there was nothing there really proving that she was a danger to herself or others. That's what's required for a Baker Act. All he had was, oh, she left the curling iron on. I mean, that's... people do that all the time. That's not enough to get them put away on a psych ward or something. But the funny thing was that the officer said to the husband, next time, pick it up by the handle. And the client was telling me this, and she was just tickled pink because it kind of demonstrates how the officer did put some of the responsibility for burning his hand with the husband. So again, that's what gave me the idea to embellish and say, what could have happened? He could have picked it up accidentally and burned himself, or very, very malignant narcissists, sociopaths, people who really want to set the stage, they will burn themselves deliberately. But this also further illustrates the importance of isolation that's required in the old school model in order for gaslighting to be successful. So in the old school model, you need trust, and my client certainly doesn't trust her husband, but this is still a very, very strong example of an old school gaslighting attempt. But as soon as you bring a third party into the mix, that third party offers an alternate view as far as what's happening here. So when that officer came in and said, you know, next time, pick it up by the handle, he's also offering the wife a different perspective on what really happened. It's not that you were irresponsible and you made your husband burn his hand. The guy could have picked it up by the handle like a normal person, and that would have prevented him from burning himself. But I do hope that this video has given you a foundation for being able to distinguish between the two models. And hopefully, as you work your way through the series, you will become very solid on which model you prefer. Some of you might prefer the new model because that's what's popular today. That's what most people subscribe to. And some of you will subscribe to the old model the way I do. Whichever one you choose, just be sure that it is your choice and that you're not being influenced by anyone other than yourself. I'm Jen Guerriero, and this is Poisonous People. See you in the next video.